usually for a first printing, I'll do 3 to 5,000. And then if it does well enough, sometimes I'll reprint as much as maybe 10,000. Especially with my first book, I did 5,000, and I had no idea if I would sell 5,000 or 5 copies. So it feels like a huge risk just print that many. And then I definitely know a lot of people just end up with a bunch of books in their garage that they can't sell or try to do it on their own.
Well, hey everyone. Welcome back to another episode of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen, the podcast where we explore the world of landscape, wildlife, and nature photography with some of the most inspiring voices in the field. I'm your host, Matt Payne, and I'm so glad you're here. This week, for episode 411, I'm thrilled to welcome a very special guest, Grant Collier. Grant is a renowned Colorado-based landscape photographer and the owner of Collier Publishing, where he combines his passion for photography with his love for storytelling through books. Over the years, Grant has captured some of the most breathtaking scenes of Colorado's wilderness, from its iconic peaks to its hidden gems, and his work has inspired countless photographers and adventurers alike, including myself. In today's episode, we'll dive into Grant's journey as a photographer, his approach to capturing Colorado's stunning landscapes, and how he balances running a successful publishing business with his creative endeavors. We'll also explore his thoughts on the evolving photography industry and how drone photography has saved his career. A quick note to listeners, I had to do some background noise reduction on this week's episode, so the audio might sound a little strange. Please forgive me. Grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us for this inspiring conversation with Grant Collier. All right, Grant Collier, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. Actually, it's funny. When I started my podcast in 2017, before I started recording, I made a list of all these people I wanted to get on the podcast. And I distinctly remember that your name was like on the very first iteration of who I wanted to reach out to. So it's been in the making for that long.
Yeah, I figured you were pretty hard up for guest if you were actually asking me, but it was amazing.
No.
I'm amazed at all the great guests you found since then, and I'm surprised you still wanted me, but I'm glad you glad you did. But yeah, I was about to get, it was like right after my second spinal fusion, and I wasn't really up to doing much of anything related to photography at the time, so I wasn't able to then, but I'm glad I'm able to now. So
yeah, well, I mean, you're like one of the Colorado landscape photography OGs, so of course I went on to get you on the show, man.
Well, you're making me feel old now.
Well, I've got some gray in the beard, man. Right on, man. Well, Grant, for people who don't know about you and your photography, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, basically, after I graduated from college in 1996, I basically started trying to make it as a photographer right then. And I mean, of course, it took a while to establish myself, but fortunately I've been able to make it work. So I'm now closing in, I guess, 30 years now, which of doing this professionally. I started doing photography in college. So I think I first started getting into photography about 1993 with a film camera, of course. So, and then I switched to digital around 2006. Yeah, I've been doing this longer than I care to admit, but yeah.
Yeah, a long time. And you're in the Denver area, is that correct?
Yeah, we're in Evergreen now. I've got a girlfriend we've been together for 15 years, so I just haven't ever gotten around to getting married or anything, but yeah, so I'm basically, I call her my wife, my girlfriend wife.
That's awesome. And no kids?
No kids. Yeah, just one dog and one spoiled dog, and that's it. So, but yeah, we moved to Evergreen about 2 years ago, and really like it up here. We were kind of down more in the Denver area before then. So,
awesome. And so, what does your photography journey look like? What originally inspired you to take up landscape photography of all things?
Yeah, I had a required course in high school and in college for art. I didn't really want to do it, but I picked photography because I wasn't too good at drawing, and I figured I could just click a button. And so in high school, I had a camera that was my parents' old camera, and the exposure meter didn't work. So just kind of had a guess on each one, and about 2 shots out of every roll of film would come out. So I ended up getting my worst grade in high school in photography.
That's
Of
awesome.
all. And then, yeah, it's required to get in college. I was in Los Angeles in college, so there wasn't a lot of nature photography to do, unless you drive, yeah, a little bit uh, outside the city or to the beaches. But it was another required class. And then around then, I started getting into like hiking and exploring a lot. So it just kind of made sense to bring my camera with me and kind of do that for the class. So I took off to, I think we had a fall break for about 5 days. I took off to Moab and took about every photograph that I was going to use for the class during that time. And that's kind of when I got hooked. And then ever since then, yeah, it's always been a passion. So
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but photography kind of runs in your family a little bit.
yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it skipped a few generations, but my great grandfather was a early pioneer photographer. He was born in Scotland in like 1836, but he actually also, I have a back injury, which I mentioned before, which is why I'm kind of lying back. I'm not just lazy, but I am lazy as well. So, but yeah, he worked as a blacksmith and he injured his back, and so while recovering, he kind of learned all about what was then the new craft of photography. And so he opened, I think, his first studio in like 1860, and then in 1871, he moved to Central City, Colorado, and took photographs all around Colorado for the next 30 years. And so that helped me to get a start in my photography career because the first book I actually did was Colorado Yesterday and Today, where I went around and reshot images that he had taken over 100 years earlier. And so that was like, I actually started that before I finished college, like the summer before 1995. And then it took a while to find a publisher, but eventually I did get that published in 2001. So that was a way to kind of get started because it's obviously hard to make it as a nature photographer. And so that definitely helped to have that in the family.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about that book project. How many photos did you try to replicate, and did you find it difficult to find those locations?
Yeah, it was a lot harder in 1995 because there wasn't Google Earth and there was, yeah, and he didn't leave much information on the photographs. So he, like, when he put like waterfall on the San Miguel or something, which isn't, it's pretty vague. I managed to, so I drove all around along the San Miguel River up near Telluride, and I eventually managed to find it. It's this really cool hidden waterfall. So it was definitely a lot more challenging back then. A lot of them were cities or towns, so for those I at least knew about where it was. But even then, it was really hard. Like the first one I did was Central City, and I had to go back 5 or 6 times because you feel like you have it right, but then I would develop the film, showing my age again, but I would develop the film and then compare them, and I realize I'm like 50 feet off, and so I'd just go back, and eventually I got to where it got a lot better, but it was definitely a learning curve in finding the locations. So, um,
And that must have been a really fun project to work on, and being able to see like the before and after, and comparing how they look today versus in the 1800s.
yeah, it was really cool to just see the changes, and really cool just to see what my great great grandfather had experienced and saw, and kind of see it through his eyes a little bit. So definitely the family connection is really what intrigued me to really do that in the first place. In addition to it being a good way to get started in photography. But yeah, it was definitely a fun project to do, and I eventually did a sequel to that, which I was able to publish myself, called Color Everything, and now a lot bigger book. But that was, by then there was Google Earth, and it was a lot easier. I could find the places before I actually left my house. So yeah,
That's awesome.
it's always been kind of a fun project to do.
Yeah. I mean, comparing historical photos and trying to recreate them in using modern techniques and modern what it looks like today, I think that's a really fun project.
Yeah, it was, definitely. And yeah, it was the first probably 5 years of my photography career was taking the photos and also trying to find a publisher for it, which was definitely one of the hardest parts. And I think I'll get into that later, but it's kind of why I started my own publishing company after that, so I could kind of have full control.
You're reading my mind because my next question was going to
Yeah,
be,
I don't need
why
to
and
do all
how
this
did you
stuff.
start your own publishing company?
Yeah.
So yeah, why don't you just dive into it? Like, what was the reason for that, and what's the process look like? How does that even work?
Yeah, I didn't really plan to when I started, but then, yeah, like I had initially when I started out, I had one book publishing company lined up, and then they dropped out. This is for my first book, and then eventually I found another one, and they were able to do it, but they have full control over everything, and so I wanted to do a big kind of coffee table sized book, but they didn't have the budget for that, so they did a smaller one. They still did a very good job with it, but I ended up doing a lot of the promotion for it myself, and as I was learning the promotion, I just said, well, if I'm going to be doing half the promotion work anyway, I might as well learn how to do everything myself. And so my second book was Colorado Moments of Time. It was more of a traditional landscape photography book. And so that one, the same publisher that did my first book was interested in that one, but they weren't sure if they could do it for a few more years. They had a kind of tight budget. So that's when I decided I'll just jump in and see if I can do this myself. I didn't really know what I was doing, so I hired a outside company to do the design and kind of find a printer for me, which was probably a mistake because it cost quite a bit of extra money. But I kind of lucked out because I was able to sell out of the first printing of that book and reprinted it. And if that hadn't worked out, yeah, my career might be a lot different today, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, you'd be working at Home Depot or something.
Yeah, collecting on unemployment benefits.
That's awesome. So I would imagine that starting your own publishing company is a pretty big learning curve in terms of understanding the equipment, understanding the process of creating the die sets, and understanding CMYK and all of those things. So like, what was the most challenging aspect of learning that entire new craft?
So yeah, fortunately, I don't have to know anything about the die sets or anything because I use outside printers. That's the one thing that I don't do myself at all.
Okay, good.
I actually print in China and South Korea. So unfortunately, it's way too expensive to print in the U.S. You just can't make a profit doing that. So I've did one book in Canada, and then most of the rest were China and South Korea. So like finding the right printer, that was definitely difficult. It took a while. I used several different ones, but eventually I found two or three that I liked best that I now pretty much go with everything. But yeah, everything else I kind of had to learn, like InDesign, learn how to design it myself, and learn how to prepare the photos properly. Because yeah, preparing photos for book printing is different than preparing for the web. So you definitely have to learn. Like you have to sharpen them a little bit more, and you have to make sure the darks aren't too dark because they'll just look muddy. So there's a lot of little details I had to learn along the way, but I gradually learned it. I mean, my first couple of books, I kind of look back and kind of cringe and say, oh, I should have done done this different and this different. But I definitely started it at the right time because back then there were a lot of different distributors. I think I had like 5 distributors at one point, like kind of local book distributors that could help me get the book out there. And they've since, every one of them has gone out of business.
Oh, wow.
Basically because of Amazon.
Right.
Well, first Borders went out of business, which was due to Amazon. And then that was just kind of a domino effect. After Borders went out, all these distributors started going out of business. But I had gotten my foot in the door enough that I was able to just transfer over to selling directly to like Barnes and Noble and something, and stores like that you couldn't really do just starting out. And so I don't know if I'd even try to start a publishing company today. If I were starting it all over, I'd probably do ebooks. because that's a lot. It's simpler, and it you don't have all the inventory, and you don't have all the shipping. And the disadvantage of ebooks is you pretty much have to do instructional books. I can't do a big coffee table book as an ebook. So, but yeah, I think it's definitely changed a lot over the years.
Yeah, for sure. And so your publishing company, Collier Publishing, I think is what it's called, right? So like, what are you just doing it for yourself? Are you printing other people's stuff, or what's kind of the makeup of that business
Pretty
look like for
much,
you?
pretty much myself. I do children's books with my girlfriend. She's an illustrator. And so I kind of use my photos in the background of the books, and she draws all the animals or aliens or whatever. And so that's kind of a fun project to do something different. I can go a little more crazy with my photos than I do with my regular landscape photos. There's not, I don't feel like I have to keep it true to the landscape or true to what I actually caught. So it's kind of fun to just be creative with that. Other than that, I do some like Hubble and James Webb Space Telescope calendars, but other than that, I don't really hire anybody outside to do books. Some people have asked occasionally, but yeah, just I don't have time, and I don't really have the desire to grow my business beyond where I'm at, because I don't really want to have employees. And I did that once, and it just it was a little bit too much for me. So
It's funny you just talked about James Webb Telescope, and for me that's a perfect segue to talk about night photography, because I remember when I was getting started in photography way back in like 2010, I took an immediate interest in night photography because of my background in backpacking and hiking and being in the Colorado Mountains all the time. And just, at night you look up and it's just incredible. And you were one of the very few people I could find at the time that was actually doing it here in Colorado. It was like you and David Kingham, and that was it, basically.
yeah.
And so I'm curious, what got you interested in night photography initially?
Yeah, I've always kind of wanted to try doing different things like within the sort of the strict realm of nature photography. So, try to be as creative as I can within that realm. And I've always kind of been a night owl anyway, so it kind of worked out. And so I actually started in 2003, and I really didn't know what I was doing, and there wasn't a lot of guidebooks on that sort of thing. And I was shooting film at the time, so I could pretty much only do star trails.
Right.
For anyone who doesn't know, star trails are like if you take a 2-hour exposure, the stars will move across the sky during the exposure, and you'll get these long streaky lines, which is a cool effect, but it's not like what you can do today with the short exposures and get the dramatic Milky Way images. But it was a good way to learn. And I don't think many of those early photographs haven't really seen the light of day for a while, but eventually, yeah, I definitely was able to slowly learn what I was doing. And then when digital came along, that helped things tremendously and made it just so much easier to do short exposures and get good image quality. So
I will say though, there's a beauty to film and the night sky because of film reciprocity, and like the fact that you just have one file and you hope for the best kind of a thing, and it's pretty lenient because of reciprocity. We actually, in the Natural Landscape Photography Awards, I think last year we had an image that was a film image of a star trail that I think placed pretty high in our night photography category. So,
oh wow, that's cool.
Maybe it's time to dig those old photos out, Grant.
Yeah, no, I did actually continue shooting with film even after digital, because with film you do like one really long exposure, so you can just kind of leave that and go around taking shots with your digital camera. So I did continue that for quite a while up until I got 2 digital cameras, so I could just shoot with still shoot 2 cameras at the same time. My biggest I do still like star trails. My biggest issue with film that I kind of noticed more and more was the color shift.
Oh yeah,
it really shifts the colors, and you get kind of these crazy pinks, and you can try to correct it in post-processing, but now that digital's caught up so much, I can definitely get truer colors even with star trails with digital. You do have to take sometimes like 200 shots and blend them all together to make the best quality search as is digital. But so I've pretty much switched to digital for everything now, but I did hold on to film for quite a while. So I did keep shooting film.
Yeah. Well, so one thing I did want to talk to you about, I mean, I know you had mentioned that you had some back problems, some health issues there. I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how your health issues have impacted your photography career and what you've done to kind of compensate for that.
Yeah, it's definitely been challenging. I've had back problems pretty much my whole adult life, starting during college, and then I ended up getting my first spinal fusion in 1998. I was still, I mean, I was 23 years old or something. And in retrospect, it was pretty risky to do it, but my back was declining pretty fast, and it actually did help. It definitely was never perfect, but it did help. And that kind of helped me get my photography career off the ground. It's because I was able to do quite a bit more for about 15 years. I wasn't able to do, I mean, I think you do like mountaineering and stuff and huge hikes. I've never been able to do that, so I've always been jealous of that. But it's always been an issue, but it got a lot worse around 2015. And then I tried to put off another spinal fusion as long as I could, but I ended up getting another one in 2017. And that didn't go as well as the first one. So it didn't make me worse, but I'm not a whole lot better either. Nowadays, it's hard for me to sit in like a regular chair for more than an hour or two. I mean, like even a good chair. And so that's definitely puts a lot of constraints on what I can do as a nature photographer. And I know around the time I was getting my second fusion and I realized it wasn't going to make me that much better. I was kind of beginning to question even the future with my nature photography. I didn't know how I'd really continue doing it, but I got over that and I kind of realized, okay, these are the constraints I have, but I'll do whatever I can within them. So now I have like a mattress in the back of my vehicle and I'll drive as far as I can and just rest as long as I need to, then just keep driving. And so now I'm able to still get around a fair amount. And sometimes my girlfriend will go with me and drive me around. But yeah, the biggest thing that's helped is as my back got worse, the drones, quadcopters got a lot better.
Yeah.
So since I can't really hike very far anymore, it's helped me tremendously. And so I know quadcopters are kind of controversial, but I think from my point of view, it really kind of saved my photography career in a sense. I mean, I'd still be doing it without them, but it's just so much easier for me to be able to just let the quadcopter be my legs and I mean, it can just zip around. I mean, so fast it's, but it also just opens up so many more opportunities for photographs because I've shot so much around Colorado and Moab that I don't have as many ideas for like ground-based shots, but there's just so many different shots you can take from the air that it just, I mean, it almost feels like almost limitless. So it's definitely been my passion lately.
It's endless. What drone are you using?
I have the DJI Mavic 3, which is definitely. Yeah. I think it's, in my opinion, it's the best consumer drone for nature photography, largely because of the battery life. It just
it's amazing.
It stays up so long. So instead of like I started with the DJI Mavic. Oh, you've got one right there. Yeah, I was wondering because I saw some photos on your website. I'm like, that's got to be a drone, and so I figured you must be.
Yeah, dude, it's a fun toy, man. This is the Mavic 3 Pro, and
oh yeah, nice.
I love the zoom lens is amazing. Like now that they've got the separate sensor for the zoom lens, it's just a game changer. I took it for the first time, at least the Mavic 3 Pro. I took it for the first time this fall. And it opens up so many more compositional. I mean, it's like you said, it's endless. It's basically limitless. It's incredible.
Yeah, I was wondering, and for anyone listening, if you've seen Matt's podcast but haven't checked out his website, you've got to go there. He's got incredible shots. I'm not sure how much he talks about his own photography on here, but you've got to go to his website, buy his prints.
Oh, thanks, Grant. I appreciate that.
Help support his podcast because I don't think I'm assuming you're doing the podcast more for passion than for income. And I think it's great what you're doing with just kind of so many different perspectives from different photographers. So.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I love that you just literally basically said that drone photography is essentially saved your photography career in terms of giving you the ability to see again. And I think that's such an amazing statement. I mean, you had kind of briefly said earlier, like, oh, drones have a bad reputation. I think drones have a pretty negative reputation out there for the most part, especially amongst people our age. Like, there's a lot of angst about it. And I know early on I was like, drones, I hate drones. Drones are evil.
Not yet.
But man, it's a game changer. I mean, there's disadvantages to drones, right? Like, I still don't feel the same connection to the photography as I do with the ground-based camera because it's not literally right in front of me. But I think that more than is made up for by the fact that you can literally make a composition in 360 degrees, and it's incredible.
Yeah, and it is amazing. You can just press one button and have it do a 360-degree pano. And if you don't like the pano, you can just crop in anywhere you want and just kind of pick out your composition after the fact. So yeah, it is. But yeah, and in terms of like the bad reputation, I get annoyed with. I saw someone flying a drone in Rocky Mountain National Park, which is obviously banned.
Come on.
So yeah, I get annoyed at other drone users too, and I try to always take off far away from people because with drones, you can fly so far with them that you don't have to take off at the beginning of a hiking trail or something or any popular place. So I'm pretty much always able to find a place kind of remote to take off, and then I'll try to take it straight up to 400 feet just to minimize the noise. And so, you definitely have to be conscientious about how you fly it and where you fly it. But
for sure.
But yeah, the advantages are I kind of compare it to automobiles. I think early on, all the people are like, oh, these are noisy. We don't need them. And then, once you get one, you're like, oh, this is awesome. So,
yeah, totally. I mean, like you said, I'm the same way. Like when I fly my drone, I'm away from other people 99% of the time. And if I'm not, it's like you're surrounded by other people. Like you're at a really popular spot where I feel like the noise is like other people are there flying drones too and stuff like that. So like that doesn't, I don't know. I feel like you have to be conscientious, I think is the word you use. And I think that's the way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love it if I was the only one flying a drone and everyone else wasn't, but but there are so many drones out there now that, there are some places that even when I just go to do regular photography with my regular camera, a lot of times there'll be all these drones buzzing around. And so I definitely see both sides of it, and I definitely see how they definitely can be annoying, and they'll probably just get more and more drones every year because, of what the amazing things they can do. So there's definitely, I'm glad that they're banned in national parks and in some places so that you can definitely go to places where you can get away from them if you don't want to be around them. So,
for sure. Well, relating back to your back injury, I'm guessing that you've also had to make quite a few adjustments to your photography business as a result of your back. Can you talk a little bit about what ways you've been able to make it work?
Yeah. Ironically, it's probably been the best thing for my photography business, if you can believe that. Because I think,
actually.
Yeah, to build a photography business, taking photos isn't the way to do it. It's I already had a bunch of photos when my back got significantly worse. And so I was kind of forced to focus more on promoting it, finding different ways to use photos I already have, and just spend so much time working at building the business that it's actually been better for my business. I almost think like if you spend 5% of your time doing photography and 95% building the business, that might be the right mix for maximizing your income. It's not the right mix for, I'd rather be out there 50% of the time shooting and making a little less money. So, but in terms of the business side, yeah, it's helped. Obviously the one caveat is I can't do photography workshops. And I did some of those early on. I never really enjoyed it. I've never, even early on, I was somewhat limited by my back. So when I was able to get out, I wanted to be taking my own photographs. I didn't really want to be teaching. So I did it for the income for a while. And then, but it was never a passion. But a lot of photographers I know make most of their living off of the photography workshops. So obviously in that regard, yeah, sitting at a computer at home isn't going to be the best way to, well, I mean, you still need to do that to build your business, but that is the one thing that I can't do anymore, but I personally don't miss it. But I'm sure a lot of people have passion for that, and I know that what a lot of photographers do, but fortunately it was never really my thing anyway, so.
Yeah. So what are the different ways you're able to make your business work?
I've like I said, I've kind of tried to find different ways to use existing photographs. So I started out just doing nature photography books and the Color Yesterday and Today book. But then I started doing one photography calendar in Colorado. But the biggest thing is I've started to do a lot more calendars. So now I produce 9 calendars each year.
Oh, wow.
As I mentioned, a few of those aren't my own photographs. Some of them are like James Webb, Hubble, but most of them are my own photographs, and I've kind of found different ways to use them. Some, we do a Bigfoot calendar now.
Yep.
My girlfriend draws Bigfoot, and I kind of write these ridiculous stories about my experiences going out to photograph Bigfoot, like traveling across the world, and I make myself out to be this just crazy person who's trying. So, renowned Bigfoot photographer Grant Collier is what I call myself. So, and so yeah, I just use my own photos in the background, and I'll admit this here, nowhere else, but the Bigfoots aren't real. The Bigfoots
I don't know, man. I had a friend of mine tell me a really convincing story once.
I'm not saying Bigfoots aren't real. I'm not going to wade into that. But the Bigfoots in my calendar, I'm admitting that they're not real.
Yes. That's funny.
But no,
that's awesome. So books and calendars. What else? I mean, is there more?
Books I mentioned briefly. We do. I've done like 10 children's books. They're called Dreaming. They'll start with Dreaming of. It's like Dreaming of Colorado, and it's always usually an animal or person who dreams that they can travel back in time and kind of see different periods of like Colorado's past or California's past. And so that's it. And that's even a more difficult business than I think photography because there's so much competition. But it's definitely kind of been fun to do that. And I've also done a couple of instructional books, one on night photography,
Right.
Collier's Guide to Night Photography, and then I have one on Arches National Park, Collier's Guide to Photographing Arches National Park. And so those, they can definitely sell better than, or easier to market and sell, more traditional like coffee table books. So I have done a couple of those. I don't think I'll do a whole lot more, but it's definitely was one of, like my night photography guide has always been one of my best sellers. So I try to keep it updated every few years and release a new edition. But that's pretty much it with what I do for my publishing. So,
but wait, there's more. Maybe this is a good time to talk about your newest book,
nice.
Colorado. Which thank you for sending that to me. And
sure,
man, as I was going through it, it definitely sparked a lot of great memories. Some amazing places that I've been to, some places I haven't been to. Some new vantage points of locations I've never even seen before, or places I've wanted to photograph before. Like, for example, this scene right here, maybe hard to see.
Oh yeah, the Great Dikes.
That scene, I have been wanting to photograph that. Every time I drive that highway, I see that dike, and I'm like, man, I bet that would be really good. But I've never done it. And then I opened your book, and there it is. So, man, tell us about the latest book. What sparked you to create it, and like, what was the process like?
I technically started on it probably 20 years ago.
20 years, okay.
Yeah. I haven't been solely focused on that. But well, my first book was Color Moments in Time. It was kind of a big book like that, but it was all film photos, and it was still fairly new to photography, so it wasn't my best book. And like with film, you get really dark shadows and sometimes washed out skies because
Sure.
obviously the dynamic range issues, and so you can do so much more with digital. That pretty much when I finished that book and started doing more digital stuff, I kind of thought I'm going to do a sequel to this, but just spend a lot more time and get kind of all my best, or most of my favorite Colorado photographs. So during that time, I did a lot of other smaller books on Colorado, but I would kind of withhold some of my favorite images to include in this book. And then I think it was around 2015 that I kind of started to focus more on this book as I finished the other Colorado projects that I was working on. And so that kind of became a bigger focus.
So, how many pictures in the book?
I don't think I've counted, but I know there's over 200. So it's
I was gonna say,
256 pages. I didn't really plan for it to be that long, but it just kind of, like, as I'm sure you know, you always find new places you want to photograph, and you're like, oh, I've got to include this. And so, yeah, it just kept getting bigger. And then, but yeah, I figured 256 pages was enough that it shouldn't go anymore. But especially as big as I was making it, with my back, I could barely lift one copy. So,
I was gonna say, one of the things I really appreciate about the book is that it's very comprehensive, and the way you've got it organized is by the different regions of the state, and you've even included the Eastern Plains, which most people
yeah,
associate with Nebraska and Kansas.
yeah, that's one thing. A lot of books exclude the Eastern Plains, and I've always been intrigued by it. Even my very first book, I included Eastern Plains, but and especially getting into night photography, I have a lot of my favorite night photos ended up being in the Eastern Plains. It's definitely a different area to photograph. It's completely different, but I think that's what makes it intriguing, just to have uh, a completely different landscape in the book, as well as I think the western slope of Colorado with the canyons that looks more like Utah. So I've always kind of liked those areas of the state, and try to focus on that in addition to the mountains that are usually the focus of.
Yeah, so
So
I have to apologize because I'm always interested in like the technical aspects of books as opposed to like the
oh yeah,
photo
no,
side of it sometimes. And so like, how many copies did you make?
4,000. So yeah,
Oh, wow.
um, yeah. With printing, unless you do print on demand, which I don't think you can do a book this size print on demand anyway. To get the cost down, I pretty much have to do over 2,000.
Yeah.
But really, I pretty much always do at least 3,000. So usually for a first printing, I'll do 3 to 5,000, and then if it does well enough, sometimes I'll reprint as much as maybe 10,000. But yeah, it is, especially with my first book, I did 5,000, and I had no idea if I would sell 5,000 or 5 copies. So it feels like a huge risk just print that many. And then I definitely know a lot of people just end up with a bunch of books in their garage that they can't sell, or try to do it on their own. And so I knew it was kind of a quixotic challenge. That's my big word for the day. I probably pronounced it wrong, but but yeah, fortunately, it has worked out for me. So I've been able to sell out of most of my books. There's one that's probably dead in the water, but the other ones, even my old ones, are still selling. Some each year to where they're on pace to sell out. So I've been fortunate in that regard. But
Okay, my next question, because you mentioned people storing their books in their garage. What's your storage solution and or your distribution solution?
it's a little bit crazy right now, but I'm switching everything, trying to switch most of it to fulfillment centers. So
Yes.
I have most of my, or actually, I have all of my calendars in fulfillment centers, in one in Austin, one in Dallas, of all places, because for like 15 years, Amazon would have me send every order to their Dallas warehouse. And my second biggest calendar distributor is located in Austin. And so I found fulfillment centers near there to save on the shipping cost. And of course, this year Amazon decided to change it to Minnesota. So I have my books in Texas, but I'm shipping to Minnesota. And I'll probably keep them in Texas because I'm really happy with one of the fulfillment centers. That's probably going to be my main one. Unfortunately, I've been able to get shipping discounts to where it really doesn't cost much more to ship across the country. And so I have a lot of stuff there, but I still have a garage full of books here. And I have a cabin in Moab that has a big shed. And so I have even more books in Moab. I'm fortunate to have a place in Moab that where I can do a lot of photography, but I've kind of put even more books there. So it's kind of, right now it's kind of crazy. I'm trying to consolidate most of it into one fulfillment center over time and have kind of my slower selling books in my own garage, but have my best selling stuff elsewhere. And that will make, it's already made shipping a lot easier because for a while I had to hire people to do the shipments out of my garage, and then we moved to Evergreen, and it's a lot harder to find somebody to do that. So
Yeah,
I'm
right.
definitely making the switch to to letting other people handle a lot of that for me.
Very smart, very smart. Yeah, we've for Natural Landscape Photography Awards, we started using a distribution center as well, and it makes life a lot easier. I mean, pay a little bit extra, but saves you so much time.
Okay, do you produce a book for that, or what do
Yeah,
you do
we've
with that?
every year we've got 3 books now, and then
Okay,
we're about to release our 4th book for year 4. But yeah, it's we just do print runs of 1,000, but even still, like, I probably have 400 books in my house.
That's not.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it adds up.
Well, my last house, when I was in Arvada, I had pretty much everything there. And so I had one entire side of a garage, and I had warehouse shelves that could let me stack it to like 12 feet high. And then we had a shed. I filled that one up completely. So I built another shed, filled that one up. And then, it was definitely even crazier then. But yeah, I've slowly am starting to get things out of my garage.
Well, good. Well, I have so many more questions for the book. So, what was the image selection process like? I mean, you photographed these scenes for over 20 years, something like that. What was the process of actually picking which photos are going to make it into the book? What did that look like? What was your process?
Yeah, as I mentioned, like when I kind of started and had the book project in mind, I was just kind of withholding some of my favorite photographs from other books that I published. I did republish a few images that I had already published, like some of my very favorites, or there are a few in a book that didn't sell as well that I decided to all put some of my favorites from that, but most of them are new images that I had never published before, which was my goal with that. And then about 2015, when I really started focusing on it, I kind of started putting all the photographs into various chapters so I could kind of get an idea of what I was missing out on and what I had. And so like I used to go to the San Juan Mountains every year and I think you live near there, don't you?
Yeah, I live in Durango.
Okay, yeah, that's nice. Yeah, and I used to just go there every year, but I just had too many San Juan Mountains photographs, and so I had to start focusing on
There's
others.
no such thing, Grant.
Yeah, there's no such thing except for a book. Yeah, I can only.
Yeah.
Well, I did an entire book on the San Juan Mountains too, but
Right.
for this book, I could only have one chapter. So
Yeah, you can never take enough photos of the San Juan Mountains, Grant.
yeah, no, you can't. And no, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, just I had to force myself to stop so I could spend time focusing on other areas of the state and actually finish my book before before the end of the decade. So I've only made, I think I've only made 1 or 2 trips to the San Juan Mountains in the last 5 years, which for me is pretty small amount. So I think now that this book is done, I'm definitely going to try to trying to get back there a lot more, especially since I haven't done too much aerial photography of the San Juan Mountains. So I'm definitely anxious to get back. But yeah, it was nice. It was still nice to see a lot of the other areas of the state that I'd kind of been ignoring for a while. So
yeah. So I was curious, when you were creating the images for the book, was there a couple of images or certain locations that you just knew you had to get, but you just kept getting stymied or weren't able to get the image? Like, were there specific images that you were like, man, I just have to get this photo and I can't get it? Like, did you have any experiences like that?
yeah, there was one. It's actually I kind of talk about it in the introduction to the book. There's a waterfall that I already mentioned that my great grandfather had shot, and I don't know how he found it because it's a pretty remote waterfall. But like I mentioned, I managed to find out where it was, but I could never. It's a spectacular waterfall, but I could just never get an image I liked of it or was quite happy with. And I went back a few times, and then finally, I think for the very last image of the book, I went back again, and I'm still not 100% happy. I still feel like I can do better, but I think I finally got an image that I was happy with that I could use in the book of this waterfall that I'd been trying to get for almost 30 years. So that's definitely one. I'm sure there's a lot of other examples that I can't quite think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Although another one, I think Callahan Paint Mines is this and I used to not even give out the name, but now it's well enough known that I will. But it's now like a county park, and I think a lot of people go there. But I first went there before it had really been discovered, and I kept just this incredible wonderland in the eastern plains of all places of these colorful badlands and rock formations and these mushroom-shaped rocks. So I've definitely gone back there quite a few times. I think I finally got the shot I was most happy with when I was going to spend the entire night there, and I finally got a shot of the Milky Way over these rocks, and finally got a shot was able to use for the book, and along with one other shot taken during the day. But yeah, there's definitely some that I just go back to again and again that I know I'm like yeah, and I know that's the case for a lot of photographers, and I actually probably do that less than most photographers because I have to get a bunch of different photos for my book, so I can't obsess over one place too much. But there are the places that I go back to quite a bit until I finally get something that I'm pretty happy with. So
yeah, I think that's one of the disadvantages of grand landscape photography is it's so condition dependent, and you know once you do photography long enough, you know what the potential is of a place, and it's like you're just almost never satisfied with what you get.
Yeah, it's definitely almost have to be OCD to be a photographer because and never quite be satisfied because there's always the better shot out there, and then you'll get online and you'll be like, oh, this guy's got so much better images. So I try to stay offline more now because I'm just like, I'll just focus on my own stuff because what some other people are doing is so incredible. And I mean, they get to places where I obviously can't get to anymore.
Right.
But yeah, so I try to just more focus on my own stuff. But yes, it's definitely can be challenging when you see what some other people are doing that are just, like, I thought I was good. And then I see it.
Yeah. I mean, you can always find someone who's doing it better than you. Comparing yourself to others is never a good idea.
Yeah, so I definitely don't do that anymore. I just focus on my own stuff, and I'm happy with what I'm getting, with what I'm able to do, and especially with my back like it is. Just that I'm thankful to even be able to still be doing this. So that definitely kind of just changed my perspective on it. Like it's not, it's just about enjoying it, and for me, it's more about being out there. Than about the photography anymore, just being able to be out there in nature, and then the photography is a bonus. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is that I feel like throughout the years, it seems like your work has remained very representative of the landscape. Like you're not doing crazy editing and adding skies and warping objects and, like making stuff look totally different than what it actually looks like in reality, which is a whole controversial debate in its own self. But
yeah,
I was curious, like, has that been an intentional part of your process, or is it just kind of like how you were raised as a photographer, or
Yeah,
what?
it's definitely been intentional. I think, as I mentioned, I got the blessing and curse of starting out doing film photography. I
Right.
think, yeah, most people who started out doing film photography are a lot more wary of doing anything crazy. Whereas I think if you started out doing digital, you're like, well, that's just normal. I mean, I'll blur the sky or I'll add a little bit lighting, nice lighting here. And so I've always had to kind of draw the line between not being left behind and just kind of never adapting and not pushing it too far. And I think a lot of photographers have that same issue. But I'm not somebody who won't do anything with their images. I mean, I definitely if there's a man-made object in the background, I'll clone it out. Well, actually, I'll keep it in the image as much as I can. But if it's just too distracting and it's just like a telephone line running right
Yeah.
through the scene, then
Right.
obviously I'll get rid of that. And I definitely take more liberties than some people do, but a lot less than other photographers. I guess I do more global adjustments, but uh, I don't try to change individual things in the image. Like, I mean, optimize the contrast, optimize the sky, but
Sure.
definitely I wouldn't replace a sky with a different sky. And I should say I don't have a problem with anybody who does go really far. In fact, I admire some of the work that people do. The thing I have a problem with is people trying to pretend like they're not doing anything. If they're honest about it and saying, look, I'm doing this more as an art than as strictly nature photography, I'm doing my artistic interpretation, then I think that's great. And I definitely like that and appreciate it. It's just some of the images you'll see that are obviously fakes, a huge moon where you are using a wide angle lens for the rest of it. And people are trying to pull that off as real. That's the only thing that really gets me. But yeah, if you're honest about it and say what you do, like when I used to actually post on Facebook, yeah, if I changed an image or if I did anything, I'd just say this is what I did, and I don't think there's
Yeah.
a problem with admitting that. I don't quite understand why some people want to pretend like they didn't do anything. So that's my only qualms. But
Do you see yourself as an artist?
I've yes and no. In some ways, I think of myself as a documentarian of Mother Nature's art,
Okay.
as opposed because I mean I'm not creating something out of nothing or creating something in my mind that just and then drawing it. And so, in that sense, I think of myself as a doc, kind of as a photo documentarian. But at the same time, there definitely is art involved. There's definitely a lot of creative decisions. So, it's I definitely think, yeah, nature photography is an art form.
Yeah.
But it all depends on your definition of art. And you ask 1,000 people, they'll all have different definitions. So I don't
Yeah.
think about that too much. I don't go into too much about like, as long as I'm happy with what I'm creating, uh, I don't care too much about the definition of whether it's true art or if it's not. I just, but yeah, it's a half and half.
Okay. No, I feel the same way for myself. I kind of have this pet peeve though about this prevalent belief system that exists where people think that if you're not significantly altering a photograph in a certain way that it's not art. Like it
Yeah.
requires alteration to be art.
Yeah,
And
well,
it's to me it's
yeah.
like focal length choice, composition,
Well, yeah, there's so many.
like what time of day you captured it, what you excluded, what you included, like the relationships of objects, like those are all creative decisions that require artistry and craftsmanship. And so like this idea that you have to do something digitally to change something to make it become art to me is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
No,
anyway, that's me.
yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. And even the people who do change your photos quite a bit, the best ones are still out there with the best light, getting the best composition. They're working. I mean, they're doing most of their work in the field. Even the ones who change it, and the ones who I think some of the new photographers sometimes think, well, I can just do everything in post processing and just make it look great, and they usually turns out pretty awful looking. So I think, I mean, I think most of the work is still getting out there and getting the photograph, regardless of whether you're someone who doesn't change it much or someone who alters it a fair amount to make it more artistic. I don't think you can escape the work that goes into the actual taking of the photographs. You can't just bypass it. I guess maybe with AI, that's a whole another issue. But
right. I mean, I guess it's like, as a landscape photographer, you know, we've spent countless days in the field, right? And we've witnessed some pretty amazing things. And to kind of manufacture that from nothing, like, I feel like it's almost like a cheating thing.
So yeah,
like you're bypassing an important step of the process, which is like the experiential piece of photography.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like this photograph behind me. I'm not saying it's a great photograph. I think it's a good photograph.
Right.
But like, that's from the top of a 14,000 foot mountain at sunrise.
Nice.
But somebody could create that and just slap a new sky in there.
Yeah.
Completely cheapens the entire process of creating the image in my mind. So
yeah, I definitely think with AI, in some respects, I mean, you can know that doesn't exist because, I mean, if you can go on Google Earth and see the image from the perspective that you took it, you're not going to be able to do that with AI. So I think you'll pretty much hopefully always be able to differentiate at least the big landscapes and say, okay, that is a real place, as opposed to if you just go crazy with AI. But as a film photographer, in some ways, I find it amusing because we all had that crisis when switching to digital. And now a lot of the digital photographers who've never done film are having that crisis with like AI, like, oh no, what do we do now? And so I'm like, we had that back with digital. And so for me, it's not even really a question of ever using AI to create a nature photograph. I mean, I might do it for a Bigfoot calendar for something fun, but for my nature photographs, it's not even, I mean, for completely create an image with AI or even substantially, obviously, like noise reduction software uses AI, so you can't, I mean, we're all going to be using AI to some extent, but in terms of pushing it, for me, it's not even a question of whether I should use it or not, because in my nature photographs, no, I'm not going to use it to create anything new. So,
yeah, no, it's interesting because I think it's, at the end of the day, it's going to be personal, and a lot of it's driven by your value system and your internal makeup as a human being. But back when I first started and I was getting really into night photography, especially, I did a lot of composite work. And I will say this, I was never really that proud of it. Like, I created it. I liked the end result. I think it looked good, but I was never like, wow, look at this amazing photograph I created. Like, it never connected that way for me. And so, and a lot of it was because I knew I had like faked it basically. Yeah. And so for me, that's a big part of it, is like having that pride of gone through the processes that are required to capture something like that authentically. I think that's just, for me, a really important part of the process.
Yeah, I think it's definitely more rewarding. And since you mentioned night photography, that is one place where I do more manipulation, sometimes because you have to overcome limits of noise. Of course. And well, I mean, some things like I'll take 100 images in a row and stack them, but that's just to reduce noise. So, I mean, it's in some ways you're making it more realistic because you're getting rid of the noise in the image. But some images I'll take a photograph during twilight of the landscape and then wait 30 minutes or an hour and take a photograph of the night sky just to get detail in both. And I did that. I did that more early on because there were more limitations to the cameras, what the cameras could pick up. And there definitely are still situations where I almost have to do that, like in a dark cave where you just can't get detail in the land in the middle of the night. But more and more, I try to do stacking images where I'll take, like I said, 100 images in a row and stack them all just to reduce noise in the land, but have it taken at the same time I shoot the image for the sky. And so I kind of drift back towards trying to make it more more realistic. But yeah, I do take more liberties in night photos just because in some ways you have to overcome limitations of the camera and the noise. So that is one area where I definitely push it a little bit farther than I would during the day. But
yeah. So Grant, I wanted to ask you a question about a little side business you ran for a little bit. I know that you used to have a gallery in Breckenridge, but you closed it down after about a year of being open. What was that entire experience like for you?
It was definitely I think every photographer, or most, probably have a dream of owning a gallery. So
right. Yeah, exactly.
And I knew going in it wasn't going to be easy, and I knew pretty much everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Murphy's Law kicked in. So I didn't want to be paying rent every month because I knew the landlord could just raise the rent. And so I waited quite a while before I started gallery and saved up enough to buy a small space in Breckenridge. So I actually bought the space, and then I kind of knew if it doesn't work out, I can rent out the space and still make it as an investment. So I at least had a plan going in, and it actually worked out in that regards. But that was right about the time my back started to get quite a bit worse. Mm-hmm. And so my plan was to be up there and working it myself quite a bit of the time. And I think part of the reason my back got worse may have been just setting up the gallery and overdoing it there, but it may have just been bad luck too. But so I wasn't really able to work there. And so I hired somebody, but I wasn't really able to go up there and train them. And so that was one issue. And then when I first bought it, there was a bank right next to me, and then there's another store on the other side. There's a pretty good amount of foot traffic. And by the time I'd opened the gallery, the bank had closed down, so there was an empty store. And then about 3 months after I'd opened the gallery, the other store, she was moving out of the state or something, so she closed her store, and suddenly I'm in the upper level with 2 empty stores on the side, each side of me.
Yeah, that's so good.
And I've got to pay more for an employee than I expected because I can't work there. And yeah, so I knew it was going to be difficult, but I didn't expect it to be that difficult. But then I ended up pulling the plug on it pretty quickly, just because when you can't be there at the gallery, it's not really that enjoyable anyway. And if you're not making money, it's
even worse.
Even worse. So I pulled the plug on it, and then I rented it out, spaced out for like 5 years, and then fortunately it got in at a pretty good time because the real estate went way up in Breckenridge. So all in all, it turned out into a decent investment. It would have been a lot easier just to keep it in stocks or something, but it was a good experience, and I don't think I'll do it again, but I definitely learned enough from that if I ever did, I think I'd know coming in. But I never did it for the making money. I knew that galleries are really tough, that most people don't succeed. And so if you're thinking about trying a gallery, do it for the love of it. Don't do it for the money. If you're one of the person who does really well with it, that's great. But most people aren't going to do well with it.
That's landscape photography in a nutshell right there.
Well, yeah, and then you can extend that to, pretty much the entire career. Most people aren't going into landscape photography to get rich. I majored in economics. I could have gone into banking or become a stockbroker or something, but I'd rather do what I enjoy, even if I'm not making as much. I've been fortunate over the years to be able to build my business up and do well, but it was never. I was always realistic going in that it's not going to be easy. So,
yeah. Well, Grant, last question: who do you recommend for the podcast?
I don't think I mentioned this in Bosco, but I briefly ran the Colorado Photography Festival where we'd get maybe like 100 participants and then eight or so teachers who would go and teach workshops. And that was when my back was getting worse, so I couldn't do workshops as much. So I decided to do that instead for a little while and have other people lead the workshops. And so I got to know quite a few other photographers that way. And so most of my recommendations are from that. The first one would probably be Glenn Randall. And he's a Colorado photographer, and he taught at several of the festivals. And so I know he's a good teacher, and I know he's good with communicating. But he's also got some very interesting stories that you could probably relate with more than I can. I know he climbed every 14er in the state during the night so that he could shoot it at sunrise.
Yep.
This was after he had 2 back surgeries. So obviously his surgeries went a little bit better than mine. But
I actually randomly ran into him when I was climbing the Maroon Bells. I ran into him almost at the very top of the Maroon Bells, and he got a cool photograph of me, and I got a cool photograph of him, and we exchanged some emails and stuff like that. So yeah,
cool.
He's definitely was one of my heroes back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Yes. So that's one. And then a couple others that taught at my festival that I just thought were good teachers and good communicators would be, I think there's Mike Berenson. He does a lot of night photography too. So, and since I do a lot, I can definitely appreciate what he does as well. And so I think he could be a good guest. And then
I'm surprised I haven't had Mike on yet. He and I have been talking to each other forever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you invited him, or have you?
I don't think we've talked about it, but okay. I definitely need to get him on the show. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know mostly Colorado people, so and I'm sure you probably want nationwide.
No, it's all good.
Since I love Moab, Utah, and photographing there, I know Brett Edge lives in Moab, and I think he'd have probably interesting stories because he was the police commissioner there, and I think he's now back to just doing photography. But I think he'd probably have some interesting stories, both on balancing one career while kind of doing photography, sometimes on the side, sometimes full time. So those were there's some others that I thought of, but you've already had them on. So I would advise against Eric Stensland. That's the only thing.
Oh no, here we go.
I would not. Oh wait, but I think you've already had him on, haven't you?
I have. We should talk about this because when we were emailing each other, you said, "Oh yeah, me and Eric Stensland, we have this feud." And I was like, how is this possible? You guys are like both really nice guys. And so I actually reached out to Eric. I was like, Eric, what is this feud you have with Grant Collier? And he was like, oh my God. He's like, I love Grant. He's one of my favorite people. And maybe you could better tell the story because it's your story to tell. But yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't share the same sentiments about Eric, just for the record. I don't believe he said that about me either. But no, he was one of the first photographers on Facebook. And so when I got on Facebook, I saw that he had like 300 followers, which was a lot back then. It's nothing now, of course. So I had challenged him to a race to 1,000 followers on Facebook, and it kind of evolved into a faux feud. So I hate to even admit that it's mostly fake. But yeah, so we kind of started going back and forth with each other, and I kind of created a video telling how bad a photographer he is, and that you should follow me instead of him on Facebook. And well, the worst part of it is that, like you said, Eric's a really nice guy, and so it's really hard to be pissed off at him and to dislike him, but I try my best. So
that's funny.
So that's kind of the backstory, and we haven't had our feud going for a while, so I thought maybe now would be a good time to at least bring it back up a little bit. But unfortunately, I think I kind of said some nice things about him, and it sounds like he has too. So it's going to be hard to really get the feud going again. But
maybe you could have a pseudonym though. You could be like an evil Grant.
Yeah, evil Grant. Yeah. No, evil Eric, not Grant. I'm the good guy.
Oh, right.
Eric's the evil. That's why which is more ironic because he seems like such a good guy. He seems like one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. But yeah, I know the real side to him. So if I even try to go in Rocky Mountain National Park, he's got his goons who just he won't even let me in the park because he says that's my territory. Nobody else can enter. So So yeah, I just want to get the real word out about the real Eric Stensland, not the one that he portrays as the good guy. So I just wanted to make that clear on this podcast while I have a chance.
You've made your opinion heard. Well, Grant, this was super fun, man.
Well, yeah, thank you, Matt. And
Hey, what's the best way for people to pick up a copy of your book?
good question. Yeah, collierpublishing.com. So my last name Collier, and then publishing, all one word.com. And yeah, so you can go there. I'm currently offering, I think it's $20 off and a free copy of my Colorado Wild book. But since I know that mostly you have nature photographers watching this, they usually don't buy nature photography books. So I just
No, they do actually.
Collier's Guide to Night Photography is probably, yeah, the one that people might be more interested in that are watching your podcast. But that's also at collierpublishing.com. I just happen to have that right there. I don't know why.
I think you'll be surprised. A lot of our listeners support other photographers. So
Okay, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Awesome, Grant.
I appreciate the plug. And
yeah, of course, man. Thanks.
Well, that wraps up this week's episode of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen. A huge thank you to Grant Collier for joining me and sharing your incredible insights on Colorado's landscapes and the art of publishing. Be sure to check out Grant's amazing work and support him by visiting his website at collierpublishing.com. You'll find his stunning books and more about his journey there. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could take a moment to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your reviews not only help more people discover the show, but also give me great feedback to keep improving. And finally, this podcast is made possible by listeners like you who support it through Patreon. If you find value in these episodes and want to help keep the podcast alive, consider joining our amazing community at patreon.com/fstopandlisten, or provide a one-time donation on PayPal through my website on the podcast link. Every contribution, big or small, makes a huge difference. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.